Hair has often been used in TV shows and movies to symbolize character development, reflecting what the characters are experiencing mentally, emotionally, and externally. Think about Thor from Marvel, Aang from The Last Airbender, or Eleven from Stranger Things. Each of these characters' hair changes throughout their stories, highlighting their personal journeys and struggles. In this video, I want to focus on the hairstyles of Sophie and Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. This film is one of my comfort movies, and while watching it for probably the 18th time, I found myself wondering, how many times are they going to change their hair? This sparked the idea for this video, and it's also serving as a nice distraction from my never-ending to-do list. So let's dive right into the hairstyles in Howl's Moving Castle. The main recruiting characters are Howl, Sophie, Calcifer, Markle, a cursed scarecrow, Heen the dog, the Wicked Witch of the Waste, and Madame Solomon. However, in this video, I will be focusing solely on Howl and Sophie. But first, here's a quick summary of the plot. Sophie is on her way to meet her sister when she is harassed by officers, and Howl magically intervenes and saves her. Then they are chased by the witch's henchmen, but Howl safely gets Sophie to her destination. Later, Sophie is cursed by the Wicked Witch and transformed into an old woman. Sophie heads to the mountains where witches and wizards reside and bumped into a cursed scarecrow that follows Sophie for the rest of the video. Sophie discovers Howl's Moving Castle, where she meets Calcifer, the fire demon who is binded in a curse with Howl and who also fuels the moving castle, Markle, a young wizard and Howl's apprentice, and Howl himself. Sophie and Calcifer strike a deal to help each other break their curses. The kingdom is on the brink of a war because the neighboring kingdom's prince is missing and they're blaming their kingdom on it. Howl often transforms into a semi-flying beast to assess the situation of the conflict. He is summoned by the king to assist in the war, but he asks Sophie to pose as his mother to avoid fighting and to avoid his old mentor, Madame Solomon. On her way to the castle, Sophie meets Heen, who she believes is Howl in a disguise, but is really Madame Solomon's dog. Sophie also encounters the Wicked Witch of the Waste again, who is eventually stripped of her powers. This event gives Howl the courage to confront his old mentor, which leads to a confrontation. As they escape from Madame Solomon, the witch and Heen also escape back to the castle with them. Howl and Sophie grow closer romantically throughout the movie. Howl magically relocates and transforms the moving castle since Madame Solomon are after them and to make room for new people. Howl shows Sophie a field and a cottage where he used to study his magic, and Sophie becomes distressed, sensing that Howl might be planning something dangerous. When the enemy begins bombing her hometown, Sophie is pursued by Madame Solomon's henchmen, and as Sophie is fleeing, a bomb is about to hit their building, but Howl arrives just in time to save her and confesses that he's fighting to protect her. Later, Sophie sees Howl needs help and decides to remove Calcifer from the castle in order to dismantle it and place him in a smaller platform to convince him to take them to Howl quickly. Calcifer manages to do so, and along the way, the witch discovers that Calcifer holds Howl's heart. She grabs him, which sets her on fire. Sophie douses her with water to put out the flames, which also extinguishes Calcifer, causing the platform they're on to break in half, and Sophie and Heen fall. Separated from the group, Sophie and Heen follow a direction from the ring that Howl gave her earlier, which directed her to a door that transports her to the past. There she witnesses Howl eating a fallen star, which removes his heart from his chest and becomes Calcifer. As she's pulled back to the present, she tells past Howl that she knows how to break his curse and that he should find her in the future. Back in the present, Sophie finds present Howl, who is bloodied and almost completely transformed into a beast. She asks him to take him to Calcifer and the others. When they arrive, the witch still has Howl's heart, so Sophie pleads for its return. The witch agrees, and Sophie places the heart back into Howl's chest, which causes the platform they're on to collapse. As the platform they're on begins to collapse, the scarecrow jumps in front to break their fall. sacrificing himself and breaking his wooden body. Grateful for the scarecrow's sacrifice, Sophie kisses its cheek, transforming him back into a man. It turns out this man is the missing prince from the neighboring country that started the war over his disappearance. His curse was broken by a kiss from his true love, but unfortunately for him, his true love is with her own true love. Howl wakes up, and he and Sophie share a tender moment, admiring each other and embracing each other. They live happily ever after in their brand new flying moving castle, with everyone except the prince who returns home to end the war. Now, let's analyze the hair transformation of Howl and Sophie and what they signify. When we meet Howl, he has long blonde hair that falls to his shoulders. The first significant change occurs when he cuts his hair into a bob with straight bangs after meeting Granny or cursed Sophie. This change might reflect Howl's desire to present himself in a certain way, or perhaps to impress Sophie. This also symbolizes Howl's attempt to show a perfect, polished version of himself, possibly as a facade. At first, I didn't think this change was significant until I remembered Madame Solomon, Howl's former mentor. She had high expectations for Howl, training him one day to take her place as head sorcerer. She is seen with clones of the young version of Howl, which represents an ideal version of Howl, and the clones all have short blonde bob cuts, and Howl's hair is naturally black. The high expectation on Howl to be perfect affected him later on throughout his life. The clones Madame Solomon keep around her are the perfect ideal version of Howl for her. Which brings me back to Howl's haircut after meeting Sophie. He attempts to display a perfect version of himself for her because she is a significant person to him, unbeknownst to her. His natural hair signifies his true self, contrasting with the idealized image Madame Solomon has of him. And his hair goes back to shoulder length before his pivotal hair change, or character development. At this point in the story, while she is cleaning, Sophie mixes up Howl's magic shampoo potions, which causes him to accidentally turn his hair orange. Howl throws a tantrum, stating, "I see no point in living if I can't be beautiful." This moment emphasizes Howl's obsession with outward appearance and perfection. His hair turns black during his tantrum, symbolizing a return to his authentic self. Later on, Howl confesses to Sophie that he feels like a fraud, using his magic and hair to shield his vulnerabilities and keeping everyone away and hinder signs of weakness, and assigning his beauty and worth to his hair. The last significant hairstyle Howl had was his black haircut, short and like chin length, similar to the beginning with his blonde hair. It represents Howl becoming his true authentic self without the mask or facade he's been putting on for the majority of his life. At this point in the story, Howl managed to confront and escape Madame Solomon's attempt to subdue him and decided to magically move locations since they'd been compromised by Madame Solomon's attempt to find them. Sophie is a significant factor in Howl's sense of confidence. She gives him the courage to stop hiding from his fears and face them head on. Now let's talk about Sophie's hair journey. At the beginning of the movie, Sophie has long brown hair, but after the Wicked Witch's curse, she becomes old and her hair turns short and gray, reflecting her internal struggles and insecurities. Her hair temporarily returns to its original color when she's asleep, indicating moments when she feels secure and vulnerable. When Sophie stands up for Howl in the presence of Madame Solomon, her hair returns to brown, symbolizing her love and confidence in Howl. Madame Solomon calls out Sophie for being in love with Howl, which shocks her enough to revert her back to Granny Sophie. When she doubts her worthiness to be loved, her hair reverts back to gray and she becomes old again. This reflects her ongoing struggle with self-esteem and the curse's influence. Sophie still believes that she isn't pretty enough. The following night, Sophie is dreaming about Howl, and in this dream, she is young again. She sees Howl, and he's fully a beast now. She says he can figure out how to break his spell, and she tells him that she loves him. And the entire time this is happening, she's in her young state and her hair is brown. Howl states that she's too late and flies off, and as he's flying off, she reverts back to Granny Sophie, and so does her hair. She Even though she's dreaming, for a small moment she allows herself to be vulnerable about her feelings for Howl. The next morning, Howl magically relocates and rearranges the moving castle since Madame Solomon is looking for them. One of the places he relocates them to is Sophie's hometown, specifically to her dad's hat shop. And Howl shows Sophie a room he made for her, which she feels touched by. Howl then takes Sophie to a beautiful field with a cottage. And at this point, Sophie is young, but her hair remains gray. Let's discuss this. This is Sophie's turning point in her story. Sophie is young again because she's allowing herself to be vulnerable about her feelings towards Howl, but her hair stays gray because she believes that she's beautiful enough to deserve it. In the field, as Sophie senses that something bad might happen, she tells Howl that she can help him break his curse even though she's not pretty enough. Howl insists that she is pretty, which causes her to go back to Granny Sophie. I did say she was starting to believe in her own beauty. During the air raid, Sophie gradually becomes young again with the state of her hair remaining gray. Howl's heroic actions and declaration that he's done hiding and is fighting to protect her makes Sophie realize that she is loved and beautiful. I believe this is when Sophie believes that Howl truly loves her and that she is in fact beautiful. When Sophie places Calcifer on a smaller platform for them to get to Howl quickly, Calcifer says he needs help moving the smaller platform since he's doing it without the help of Howl. Sophie sacrifices her hair to fuel Calcifer, symbolizing her full acceptance of herself and her willingness to help Howl, and thus completing Sophie's hair/character journey. At the end of the film, Sophie and Howl admire each other's hair. Wow, that was a lot. Howl's character journey through his hair changes reflect his struggle with identity and vulnerability. Sophie's hair transformation signify her evolving self-confidence and self-worth. Together, their stories illustrate a journey of accepting love from others and finding confidence within themselves. Thank you for watching this video. I really wanted to talk about the hair transformation and this movie because this is my favorite movie. It's my comfort movie. I love this movie so much. Please leave a comment below if you have anything else to add. I know there's a bunch of things I most likely left out, and I would just love to hear everyone's opinion. So yes, leave a comment, and yeah, I hope you have a good day. See ya.